This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road, Jack, Finding the Zodiac. We are back in 1947 in the Black Dahlia case. I did take us back a couple slides, it looks like here. I just wanted to point something out I think I failed to mention. And in this particular postcard of January 29th, 1947, Arrested for Forgery, I named it. And it was a postcard to the Herald Express. It says, the person sending those other notes ought to be arrested for forgery. Ha ha. Now, of course, we talked about some of the concepts inside this postcard, but one of the things I failed to mention was the early onset of this individual's acknowledgement about forgery and handwriting making an identification. So I know that the Zodiac specifically admits to he's able to write unlike himself. He says it in the Scorpion letters. He says it in the Zodiac letters. He is astute to some of the forensic sciences that could be used to figure out who he was during these time frames, including fingerprints, which he used cement to cover those fingerprints. And he is very well aware of handwriting and how to change those particular characteristics in handwriting in order to not be detected as the author. So I wanted to bring that up and mention that. And then on this next one on January 29th, so he's actually mailing off multiple cards on the same day, which is something that also the Zodiac Killer did, 2 to 3 communications at a single time to different locations. And this one also to the Herald Express, he says, if he confesses, you won't need me. I am not sure if there was an individual at this point in time, 10 days after the Black Dahlia killing, that was actually under arrest, that was actually admitting to these murders, or if this was a possible cross connection back to the lipstick killings where they were able to get Bill Hirons to falsely confess to the crimes of the lipstick killings, which would be another tie-in if that were the case. So if I had some more information in regards to these files, maybe even I think going through the FOIA files to determine who they had at what time, or if there was an individual they actually had arrested that had confessed, that would be some interesting news. If anybody knows about that, you're welcome to contact me at findingthezodiac@gmail.com. That would be great information to know. Or to be able to tell whether or not, like I said, this was him stating that there were other people confessing or taking credit for his crimes. Okay, so we had some other messages I have not actually seen the message to. So these were found in the FOIA files and other research that I've done through newspapers. One of them was a message that says the Dahlia's killer cracking wants terms. So again, offering to turn themselves in if they're given the right terms. The part of this particular message that raised my hairs was the fact that Dahlia's killer cracking, because we see that the Zodiac used the term crack proof several times in his letter as though he was crack proof. They couldn't figure out who he was. They couldn't catch him. So I thought that was always some earlier onset of that same ploy when he says the Dahlia's killer is cracking, and that later on the Zodiac says he's crack proof. Another message that I was researched and found was, we're going to Mexico City, catch us if you can. I put next to this that I did want to research it and see if I couldn't find this file. I have not been able to do so far. It does indicate that they're going to Mexico City, which I found extremely interesting once again, because the Zodiac at Lake Berryessa, the culprit claimed that he was going to be going to Mexico. And then in another murder that we're going to talk about of H.B. Tennyson on 11/5 of 1948. I believe he was suicided by what we call the poison pen, and the Zodiac does don the poison pen card. It was found in a lockbox through cryptic messages with a confession letter to the Texarkana Phantom Murders. I also thought that was extremely interesting for a cross connection, because the Texarkana, I do believe, is the Zodiac. The Zodiac turns in the poison pen, and this individual, H.B. Tennyson, is suicided by the poison pen. And inside this poison pen, found in the lockbox where he takes credit for the Texarkana Phantom Murders, are rolls of film from Mexico. Also, the letter found in Bill Hiron's possession while in jail indicated that the crew was heading to just south of El Paso, Texas. So I've put up a map here, and you can see that El Paso, Texas is right at the very tip and corner of Mexico, between Mexico and Texas, basically right there on the border, and that the only thing south of El Paso at that particular point is Mexico. So we have seen a lot of references to Mexico. Some of the other things I've skipped across while researching these cases is that I found there was a reference to a ranch in Mexico where the mob, the CIA, was hiding individuals, or others that were purportedly known to have been under indictment would flee to this place in order to escape from testifying and or being incarcerated for things like IRS fraud, money laundering, money making, killing people. Meanwhile, Cuba is still open for all the mob and syndicate activities at this time. So this also may be a place where they go before they then shoot off to Cuba, and they're on another planet basically, and nobody can find them. We will actually talk about an individual that we thought was a murder suspect of the Zodiac, but it turns out it may actually appear as though that person was involved with whatever was going on and was in fact hidden in Mexico at some point in time. So when we get back to the postcards in the Black Dahlia, we have this particular postcard that comes in that's a photo. It says, here is the photo of the werewolf's killers. In the word killers, we see that the killers is spelled with 2 lowercase i's rather than 2 lowercase l's. This particular misspelling or appearance of misspelling this particular word is very similar to murderer or murders that we've seen in the past communications, where they actually use the wrong spelling or the wrong tenses for these particular statements. So we will see more of the word killer that is misspelled in just this manner. It is something that had been brought to my attention by Harriet Suchet in regards to some of these cipher solves that she had been doing. So we'll see, and we'll talk about those as they come along with this double letter I. So it says, I saw him kill her, a friend. Now, a friend is something that I also took note of, because in the Riverside or the Sherry Jo Bates murder, we had the Patricia Houts letter that actually said a fellow student. So I'm not really focusing on what the sign off is, other than the fact that they use the word or the letter A, the word A, before the actual sign off. So this is a very consistent sign off between these two, and we'll see that come about more than once. We see it in the Zodiac, the SLA letter, and a citizen, as he called himself, and the Patricia Houts, a fellow student. And here we have him with Armand Robles as a friend. Now, this picture that is on this particular postcard is a picture of Armand Robles, which he had obtained when he robbed and stole his wallet. So he actually had access to his photos, and he used those to make these particular postcards and send them in. The outside of this particular postcard, we see the Los Angeles Herald and Express. Now, Herald is spelled correctly once again, so it goes back and forth. And we see 1243 Trenton, and Trenton is misspelled in Los Angeles, California. The flourish on the top and the bottom of the crossbars in the letter L has been seen in Jack's Navy photo, where he used what I call the lift gate, or the flourish that raises up from the bottom of the crossbar and down from the top of the crossbar on the C. And it's also indicative of newspaper print. So he may have been trying to copy some type of particular font from the newspaper. The Trenton part of it actually will come about and has been mentioned in many of the communications in regards to how it built its way up to the Anthrax letter and Trenton, New Jersey, which was supposed to be one of the locations where one of the communications was mailed to Bruce Ivins. The partial addressing that's seen here is very consistent with all of the Black Dahlia postcards, and it is seen in the Zodiac letters as well. So we see the construction of the actual address with no zip code. Again, it's not a fully formed address. However, these letters are still making it around whether they're postaged correctly or not. I have thrown some of the letters together here that I thought were very consistent. To the left, we have the D.B. Cooper case. At the top, we have the Elizabeth Short Black Dahlia case. We have a portion of the letter from John Walsh in 1991. We have a suicide letter, which we're going to be talking about here in a couple minutes in regards to the Black Dahlia case. We have the anthrax letter, or at least one of the anthrax letters. And then we have a envelope over here to the left bottom corner, which is the Zodiac in 1990. I like to note that this actual card was not found, I believe, until 2007 when we get to that. It was postmarked in 1990, which meant it sat somewhere for a number of years before it actually came to light. So all in all, I found that these particular communications were significantly similar to each other in their construction and their use of disguised writing. We also had what I referred to as block letter writing in the Black Dahlia. We saw the block letter A, which can be found up here at the top. Where's my mouse? There we go. Okay, so right up here at the very top, we see this block letter A that was actually crossed out. That was on the old nut card in regards to the man on the hill. And then inside of the Navy writing, or the Navy picture of Jack, we see again this use of this block letter writing in the letter C's, the letter U, the letter S. Pretty much as you go through this, just about everything is in some type of a block form of writing. And the Zodiac also wrote in a block form. So again, we get to see this letter C that has been used in Jack's writing down there at the bottom. And we get to see the entire word chronicle that's done in block letters. We also had block letter writing in the lipstick killing case, the Black Dahlia case with the Los Angeles. Ooh, back. Okay. And then Jack Terrence himself wrote in a block letter form, which it's a little hard to see here, but he wrote the word vacuum and the U's are done in a block form with squared off bottoms instead of a curvature like a letter U would normally contain. So he does this in his personal writing as well. We also see it in the D.B. Cooper. I think that once I found D.B. Cooper, I had not gone back to the slide to actually put in here that there was block writing also found in the D.B. Cooper case. So it seems to be one of the many MOs in writing that we see from the Zodiac Killer. So he did cutouts, he did block letter writing, he did regular writing, he did cursive writing. And then when we get into some of these other cases, we'll see how those cross over. But I don't see that that's any different than the MO in killing, which could either be by knife, by gun, by strangulation, by bludgeoning, by fire, making it look like a simple accident. So I feel like he has as many MOs in his writing as he has in his murders. Now we're going to get to the actual handwriting examination. This is where things get interesting. I did do this presentation actually for LAPD. I always like to bring something like this up, but if you can see this board here, you can actually see I've been keeping this since 2009 when I met Dennis Kaufman, and it lists all the different times I've provided a presentation or a demonstration to different individuals at the FBI or law enforcement, and those that would allow me. Also Tim Miller, and with his first private investigator, Robert Young, and then the attempt to notify the Amerithrax Committee and the 40 Congress members that were involved with that. So I literally have that still mapped out. That board has looked exactly like that since 2009, and then carried on to each and every time I have an opportunity to share that with somebody. So in this handwriting examination, we're going to start with, once again, what I told everybody from the beginning. The author appeared to be attempting to use all capital letters. And so when we look up here into these capital letter A's listed by the Black Dahlia here, we can see that they're all, one is so different from the next. And that's usually what gives you the clue that they're disguising or attempting to disguise their handwriting, because they're either made perfectly or they're made in some abstract way that a person doesn't really actually write. So we know that this isn't the author's natural handwriting. Also, we took note to the fact that we had down here 4 small letter A's that were in the middle. Actually, we had 6 letter A's altogether. So from the Black Dahlia that were lowercase letter A's. So finding those out of this many A's where the author attempted to write in all caps tells me that he actually uses proper capitalization when it's necessary, and lowercase writing is his primary line of writing. So as we get up into the letter A's, you're going to find some of the similar consistencies that we found with Jack and the Lipstick Killer. We see some of these crossbars that come off to the right-hand side and waver to the right. We see the leaning of the actual A itself, and even the shape of the letter A is consistent in the capital forms of letter A. We did have some, I pulled something from Jack from 1945 because I was a little short, obviously, on having contemporaneous writing from Jack from 1945, other than that picture from the military. But we can see how these blunted letter A's that were in there are actually found inside of the Zodiac writing as well. Moving into the lowercase A's, this is where I see the lowercase a that is done almost in the normal fashion, which is very, very consistent with Jack's handwriting and the construction. I wish I could move some of these bars, but these were actually created into PDFs. Normally I can actually pick this stuff up and move it out of the way for you to be able to see, but hopefully everybody can kind of see what this particular letter A looks like and how that compares to Jack's letter A up here. Basically pretty much identical. When we move over here to the right to these alternate bell top A's, these are the A's that I suggest have been removed from the Zodiac's letters for the perception of the public. This is one of the things they were asking the suspects to write in the Zodiac suspect pool. They would ask them to write a communication that the Zodiac had written, and then they'd ask them to specifically write bell top A's, which again, I couldn't really kind of wrap my mind around. If we couldn't find any bell top A's in the letters that are being presented to us as the public today, then why would the FBI or law enforcement be interested in having suspects write this letter A unless it did exist at one point in time? So cross-comparing these particular bell top A's to Jack's, I did note that Jack has this angularity at the top of the bowl. We can see that that's actually occurring in the Black Dahlia, where there's an upturn there, or an angularity, rather than it being round. And we can see that there are letter A's that are absolutely 100% consistent with Jack's writing. So the bell top A's there have been solved, and I believe that this is more of a natural writing for Jack. The letter B, we had 5 of these letter B's. I do find that the slant of these B's and the way they lean forward were identical with each other. Also to this missing portion where he does not carry the bottom part of the bowl all the way back to the stem, and the stem sticks out. This could actually be seen in several of the, This can actually be seen in several of the letter B's that are found, and the consistency or the shape of these letter B's are absolutely identical as well. Getting into the letter C's, again, I only had the block-shaped C's from 1945 in Jack, but we do see that there are some regular C's here from Zodiac, or I'm sorry, from Black Dahlia, and we can see again he's attempting to disguise his handwriting. One looks as different than the next each time he writes it. So again, he's attempting to disguise. In the letter D, we did find 2 lowercase d's in Black Dahlia. Again, that brings us back to the fact that he does use lowercase writing, and he accidentally slipped up and left these. We can actually see that the stem of the D is absolutely identical in the slant, and the shape of the actual bowl of the D, again, is similar as well. Even these 2 D's here have exactly the same slant on the stem bar. And then as we climb into these capital letter D's, we also find this particular, what we showed in the letter B, where the bowl of the D comes back to the stem but leaves this little tiny portion of the stem hanging out of the bottom. That is definitely something that we see happening in Jack's writing very consistently. We had several more capital D's in here than most letters, so it did allow me to actually lay them down and look at the different styles, the different shapes. And we can also see as we move through Jacks the consistency where one doesn't necessarily look completely different from the next. There is an internal consistency that makes them all appear very similar. And we do have some oddballs, or those ones that are created differently at different times. The letter E was basically a home run. Again, we have all of the slants that are occurring in the letter E are identical to what is occurring in the Black Dahlia letters, from the 4-stroke construction where each stroke is actually executed separately from the stem, and the shape, size, and everything of these particular letters are very, very consistent with each other. The letter F, again, we found consistencies with the letter F, which is also this very tall stem where the crossbars are basically more towards the top rather than halfway point and top point, and you can see that that is consistent with Jack's letter F's here. The very tall lowercase f, so we did have 2 lowercase f's that Black Dahlia dropped, or the Black Dahlia Avenger dropped, and we can see these long stems of Jack as well. So again, a consistency there. Looking into the lowercase e's, which again, we have several lowercase e's in the Black Dahlia writing, and we found that the shapes and the size and the way the actual top portion of the e slants is definitely consistent with Jack's writing. Our letter G's, again, look at one to the next. You see varying differences of these particular G's, but we still have what I would consider to be consistent formation and construction with just the tail that hangs down. It looks to me that the Black Dahlia Avenger is not very familiar with actually adding tails, so we see these very awkward looking tails as if they're not used to using them. I would say that this one is probably written with fluidity, speed, and more natural than these other 3, but we can still see that these consistencies with these openings at the top that are occurring is definitely something that is happening in Jack's writing as well. The capital letter G, we had a couple different styles inside of the Black Dahlia. We had those that were with an actual crossbar across the G, which they are extremely consistent with Jack's handwriting, even to the fact that they lean forward to the right, as did the letter B and the letters D and the letter F. Pretty much he has a hard right slant, and sometimes it's even harder right and even actually crosses the paradigm of the baseline, which would be an indication that he's pretty much out of his mind. But this far leaning forward thing is definitely a consistency. We also see what I refer to as the number 6G, where we don't have that crossbar that comes off of the center, and it literally is formed like a 6 or a C with a curve to the inside. This is definitely consistent again. So Jack has both styles of these G's in his arsenal, and again, I find consistency. When we got into the letter H, it looks like we only found capital letter H's in the Black Dahlia writing, but what I wanted somebody to notice is the slant of these letter H's. Again, these bars that I laid down. These in blue would indicate Jack's handwriting. The red would indicate the question writing. But what I would do is lay these bars down on Jack's writing, and then I would copy and paste those bars down here. So they're identical. There's no reforming. There's no chance that I have accidentally turned this in a way that made it appear as though it was similar. By simply cutting and pasting that down to the next one, just brings that particular slant as it sits there, and we see that it's absolutely identical for Jack's handwriting. The letter I, we noticed that the Black Dahlia had actually used the letter I without crossbars on the top and bottom. We see that in Jack's 1945 writings, the way he executed the capital letter I was also done in the same manner with no crossbars at the top, some being a little longer, some being a little shorter, as we see with Black Dahlia. And then when we get into the lowercase i's, we find this heavy period dotting on top of the i's, which is almost consistent with what we'll see soon is the heavy period dotting and heavy pressure of the Zodiac. And that also leads into sometimes a circular eye dot that is created by both Jack and the Zodiac himself. So an over concentration on these period dots above the lowercase I. In our J's, interestingly enough, Jack actually used a crossbar on his J's in 1945 when the Black Dahlia actually used a crossbar on his letter J. We do see a slight crossbar in one of Jack's J's up here, but for the most part, we are seeing some differences with some consistencies. We only had one from the Black Dahlia, so I didn't lean one way or another on this. We just know that Jack did at one point in time actually use a crossbar on his letter J. The letter K comes back into play with shape, size, construction. We can see these arms and how they actually elevate up and to the right. They're a little taller than the stem on the left-hand side. And we can see that that buckle is consistent with the buckles that Jack uses himself. The letter L's, so varying. As we go through the Black Dahlia letter L's, we can see all of the differences that this author attempted to make appear as though was his writing. And we can actually see when we get into some of Jack's letter L's, the consistencies with many of these letter L's inside of the Black Dahlia writing. The letter M's, these are some of my home run hits because the letter M is something that Jack definitely attempted to disguise in the Zodiac writing. When we get there, you'll see what I mean. But Jack is notorious for writing a capital M in the middle of lowercase writing. It's done in a 4-stroke construction, and it is usually the size of lowercase writing. So even though it's a capital letter, it still maintains the size of lowercase writing throughout. And we can actually see where I've placed down some of these crossbars and how they actually meet up and make the particular shape that these slant bars are making. So again, I literally just cut and pasted this one, brought it down here. It matched up perfectly. I cut and pasted this one that goes to the right-hand side down and again perfectly. And then the one that is on the far right-hand side of the letter M is then cut and pasted down onto this letter M. So again, consistencies all the way around. The letter N, now this is the capital letter N because when we get into the lowercase n, Jack actually does a capital letter N in his lowercase writing as well. So as we go through Black Dahlia, we see a run of the capital letter N's where he was attempting to use all caps as a disguise. But then we actually see these letter N's that was used in lowercase form when he was attempting to continue the disguise, but felt the need to write in lowercase letters. Taking a look at these letter N's, you can see that one from the next is extremely different. Again, telling me that this is not a form or shape that this individual typically or would normally use. Otherwise, we would see a better consistency or internal consistency of these letters. So basically, going back through the letter N's or the capital letter N's with Jack, we can see this rounded hump that occurs. The rounded hump that occurs in the Black Dahlia letters is actually something that Jack does in his own letter N's. And then this high reaching right side of the stem that reaches up into the sky. Again, very consistent. When we move over to the ones that seem to be a little less artistic and a little more strict, we find that they are extremely consistent with Jack's letter N's. I mean, if you look at this letter N right here from Black Dahlia and you look at this one here from Jack, again, it's just a no-brainer, a home run hit. I did not pull out Jack's lowercase n's except for one that I'd seen, or actually it looks like two of them that I had seen that were written in a lowercase fashion because that's not his norm. It's very hard for me to find those in Jack's writing, but he is clearly capable of using and writing in that manner. When I got down into the letter O's, these were not as notable as when we got into the Zodiac writing because the Zodiac writing actually used an inner loop, and we can see that inner loop that is starting here on Jack's. So obviously it was very, very strict writing here that was able to keep any loops out of it. But again, I'm not finding any irregularities. I'm not finding that they are starting and stopping in the wrong place. They seem to be doing what they need to be doing as far as construction is concerned, starting at the top, ending on the right-hand side, and that is consistent with Black Dahlia. We can also see, though, in 1945, Jack's O's did not contain inner loops either. So the inner loops may have been something that came along with more cursive writing at a later date or at a later time. The letter P, again, I found nothing but consistencies in the construction, the form, the shape, the way that the author actually extended the particular P back across the left side of the stem, the shape or the uplift of the actual bowl itself, and the way that it actually raises up into the air. As we go down the list of the letter P's into more simplified forms, we actually start to see additional consistencies, including this double stem loop that we see here, which is definitely seen in Jack's handwriting, whether he's writing cursive or not. The lowercase r's that we found in the Black Dahlia case, again, one is so artistically different from the next. There is no rhyme or rhythm. I couldn't even find a couple of them that were so consistent that allow me to determine what portion of that letter is actually a natural portion of writing. So I did actually throw up some there from Jack, and we do see the checkmark R's that we'll talk about later in the Zodiac case, which I think that he tried really hard, if you can see by the overuse of the stems that are occurring here. But we actually see that overuse of the stem in Jack's writing as well. So there are some small consistencies. When we get into the capital letter R, I find that most of them he tried to write pretty much copybook or as perfect as he could so as to deter identification. But then there were aspects that I saw, like this particular R in Jack's, where the buckle does not come back and meet the actual stem and then just kind of hangs there rather than actually coming out and away from the R. And we can see that particular R right here in the Black Dahlia's writing. Letter S's. As we go through the letter S's, we do see consistencies in shape and form. Some of these letter S's were actually, even leaning the same direction with the same shape and form. And we see the double S's within the the Black Dahlia and in Jack's handwriting, again, are very consistent with each other. His 1945 writing actually used the block letter S, so that wasn't something I could use to make it a consideration of. And the letter T, again, we have what appears to be the same overstroke of the top of the T, whether or not it actually touches down. The waving of that actual letter, so we see that this one's kind of concave rather than flat, and we see that that's occurring here in this particular letter T. Also, when he tends to write the letter T's smaller, we see that they're a little more truncated, a little more square, but still leaning to the right, as most of his handwriting does. And then when we found the lowercase t's, again, we see what appears to be an attempt to disguise, if you will. This particular letter T is actually what I note Jack for most notoriously, because I feel that this is a monogram for Jack. So when he writes a T in this manner, it's not only a backwards J, but it's also a T. And we'll see some of these symbols in some of the ciphers of the Zodiac where I believe he's made a monogram out of things just like this. So when you go up and you look at Jack's letter T's, you can see that, again, he is using that copybook print T where it has the little curvature at the bottom, and many of his T's actually contain that curvature. When I move into the letter U's, the only thing that's really notable about this is that Jack does not use a stem on the right-hand side, as many people do. So you have two types of U people. You have a U where they use the stem, you have a U where they don't. And quite frankly, Jack did not use the stem. Black Dahlia also did not use the stem, but look at these letter U's. Absolutely identical in the way they lean, their shape, their size, pretty much everything. Even to this V-shaped one that we see here, we can see that there are V-shaped ones in Jack's as well. And then once again, in 1945, he used this block letter construction that was not comparable. Here, it looks like I pulled out some numbers, so I wanted to be able to show the number 2s, how they're written and how they compare to Jack's writing. We see, again, a very good similarity in regards to these. One of the things that I like to note is that I completed a longitudinal examination of handwriting of my girlfriends. So I was one of those people in high school that notoriously passed notes in class. I actually was one of the people that kept these notes. So I have them still to today. I was able to collect handwriting from these girlfriends 30 years later and show how the consistency of their handwriting stayed the same. So while people think that we start with one handwriting and that evolves into something different, it's not entirely true. While it might hone in and it might get a little tighter, a little neater, a little nicer, a little more habituated with a little more time to of practice and have using these particular forms, but they don't necessarily altogether change. So when I look at handwriting from somebody, even as a child, these deviations that they're making from the learned lesson isn't necessarily that they're writing bad. It's just the way their brain perceives the images and the output from the actual writing itself, and how that occurs. So we would like them to write sometimes in a nicer fashion, but we have to also understand that that's the way their brain perceives it. That's the way the output is. So some of these factors, even as a child, will never change throughout your handwriting. You can actually find that longitudinal study on my website at www.handwritingdocumentexamination.com. And there are two of them. I have two different girlfriends, and you can go through and see the things that stayed the same and the things that evolved or became nicer, neater, and more habituated. So as we go through here, I did not find anything that would cause me to believe that these number threes could not have been made by Jack. In fact, they are fairly similar, at least in the way they slant and the actual way the form of the three is. The number four, again, we have fours that have the crossbars that come all the way across. We have the number fours that do not cross all the way across. And then again, the shape itself is fairly similar in regards to Jack. I did find in the number fives that when I laid the slant bar down over the top of where the first crossbar stops and begins to work its way downward, all the way through it, we find that a small portion of the bowl of the five actually sticks out of the back side. This runs straight down through pretty much the middle of that bowl as it does here. And then in the number nines, we again see this backward slant, kind of like his G's. I look at his number nines just like his G's because they're pretty much the same form. As we get into the W's, I did show that we have both rounded W's and angular W's by the Black Dahlia author. When I did a cross comparison of that, I found that Jack also did both the rounded versions and the angular version. And when you look at the angular version, you can see that it does definitely have some similarities with Black Dahlia. The letter X in itself is, there are consistencies with it. Jack's seem to be a little bit all over the place, but so does the Black Dahlias. I was more intrigued by these ones that have this curvature in the actual bar itself, and we can see that that curvature is started here in Jack's as well. I always kind of described the Zodiac's letter Z as what looked like a snake getting ready to strike, and I see that that is no different here with the Black Dahlia's letter Z's, where it kind of hunches backwards or is leaning more to the right as if it is pulling back and getting ready to strike. And that is very consistent with Jack's letter Z's. So again, you're going to find consistencies with the letter Z between Black Dahlia and Jack. I did actually pull up I was able to find in the Black Dahlia, the AM that was found on the postcard where he notated the time next to the date. And we see this little uptick on the left-hand side of the M. We actually found that in the only version of the AM I was able to find in Jack's handwriting also had that little uptick on the beginning of the letter M. So again, another consistency. The Y's for Jack are always done in a two-part construction with the main stem and tail and then the short arm to the left. And as you go down and you look into the Black Dahlia, again, very similar in form, in shape, in construction, and in slant as well. It looks like the only and sign that I found in the Black Dahlia, again, is formed like Jack forms his and signs. And again, I mean, many people form their and signs in that particular manner, but seeing how we're not seeing a difference in that and sign, I'm going to conclude that that is still within Jack's realm. Here, I was able to find other words that were similar or consistent with what was going on with Jack and the Black Dahlia. And in some cases, I pulled in things from the Zodiac because we had more of those to do a cross comparison with Black Dahlia. So we found in Jack's writing the word or the 38 caliber, and of course in the Zodiac's writing he indicated that he shot a man with a 38 in a parked car. So I pulled those up to show the consistency and how they pretty much line up spatially to each other. I think this one could probably use to be brought up just a tiny bit more, and once that happens, it would probably straighten out or fix that spacing. In the XT that we showed seconds ago, that curvature XT, we see that the T actually protrudes the stem up through the top of the slant of the crossbar, and that crossbar is concave once again. We look in Jack's XT and we see exactly the same thing. The stem actually protrudes through the top of the crossbar, and the crossbar is again concave. I did put some things together like California from Black Dahlia and the Zodiac. You can see the consistencies there. Again, these letters actually line up with each other. That's a huge consistency for me. Also, the spacing that occurs between the CA and the LIF is consistent between these two authors. So again, I do find that there is a match between the attempt to disguise this particular word, California, or the abbreviated California, on the addressing of their envelopes and cards. When I moved into the Los Angeles, we see that Black Dahlia can clearly spell Los Angeles correctly, then we see it spelled incorrectly, and then we see it spelled correctly again. Taking note to this actual space again between the E and the L in Angeles, and noting that Jack also contains that same space in between the E and the L. Now, was this a joke by Jack, or was this actually something that Jack did on occasion, which was to misspell? So I'm not really sure if this was a ploy to dumb himself down as the Black Dahlia, but it appears as though Jack has done this in his own natural handwriting, where he spells it correctly and then incorrectly and then correctly once again. Either way, we find that when Angels is written together, almost no spacing. Actually, the slight spacing and the larger spacing happens between the G, L, E, and S, which is consistent over here, where the A and G are literally almost on top of each other, and then there are spaces allowing for the letters G, L, E, S. The letter to Hoover also spelled Los Angeles incorrectly, and once again we have the A protruding on the N. The N is actually closer to the G, and then we start to see those spaces again, though I have not made an identification of this letter as to it having any reference to Jack. I do not have any cursive writing from that time frame in order to do that comparison. When I moved into the word like express from the Black Dahlia, I wanted to then see how that lined up with Jack's word, and all I could really find was press in that particular instance. And of course, since most of this is written in capital form, I was not able to really do an apples to oranges type thing, other than to say that once again, we see that there is this nice spacing between the E and the S, and that occurs with pretty much every time it is written. So we had 4 weeks between Elizabeth Short's murder and the next murder, and then we see them every 3 weeks, which is basically just like what we saw in the Texarkana Phantom murders. The 8 victims that we're going to see, the first 2 sets of 2 are 4 weeks apart, and then the next 2 sets of 2 are 3 weeks apart. I'm sorry, that was the Texarkana Phantom. So we had 8 victims, with the first 2 being 4 weeks apart, and then the following 2 3 weeks apart. And then one final murder of McSpadden on his way out of town via the railroad. So looking at the misspelling of Black, we've already looked at the misspelling of that. We can go ahead and move on. This brings us to our next murder, which actually occurred 9 days after the Black Dahlia. And this was Mary Tate. This could also be related to, we have a suicide letter that says, "Sorry, Mary." And so I'm not sure if that is in reference to this, or to his wife, Letha Marie Self. So I've actually kind of played it in two different ways in my mind. I do rather think that it is related to Mary Tate, since her death was literally 9 days after the abduction of Black Dahlia, and that particular suicide letter actually indicates that he was not caught for the Black Dahlia doing. So we have Mary Tate, who was strangled with a silk stocking. This kind of plays back into the Black Dahlia, where her stockings were found on a particular street that was supposed to indicate some hit at Hoover. Her hair had been partly cut, and the left side of her face was gone from the lip to the ear. So this almost is, again, reminiscent of the acts that were perpetrated on Black Dahlia. Her breast was also severely slashed, just like Black Dahlia's, and there was a significant body writing in the victim's own lipstick. So this cross-references back to the lipstick killings and the lipstick on the wall. He actually wrote on the torso of this individual, "Fuck you, BD, killer," and underneath that, the words Tex. And Tex, obviously being a Texas term, I lead back to Jack being from Texas, so that fits right in. And he also does this on Jean French as well, which is a repeat. So we have a cross connection of the lipstick killer cases to the California killings now via the lipstick itself. So as I'm going to just read an excerpt from that. As with other well-publicized serial murder cases before it, Elizabeth Short's killing elicited a spat of what they wanted to refer to as copycat murders. I do not believe that they are copycats by any means. 3 days after Short's body was found, Mary Tate was strangled with a silk stocking. Within a month, Jean French, which we're going to be coming up to her, was found mutilated in pretty much the same way. Obscenities had been scrawled all over her body in lipstick. Then a third woman was murdered and mutilated, followed by 3 more horrible deaths through the beating and or strangulation. Again, this falls right in line with what we're going to be talking about with the Zodiac. Each of these crimes had some features that seemed to relate them to the Short's death. Detectives probed hard to determine if there were any connections. Tate was savaged, her hair was partly cut, and the left side of her face was gone from the lip to the ear. A breast was severely slashed, and there was some significant body writing. The killer had written, "Fuck you, BD killer," on the torso in her lipstick. One report adds the word cocksucker, though I do not see that. I have not seen any proof of that. The killer signed the message too under the initials BD, was what appeared to be Tex and an O. So I'm not sure what the O is for, but it has been suggested repeatedly throughout the years that the Black Dahlia murder was a part of serial murder series. I do believe this. A grand jury was impaneled to hear evidence in the Black Dahlia case. It concluded the 1949 grand jury probed into the murder of Elizabeth Short, who is known as the Black Dahlia. This is but one of a number of brutal unsolved murders which have taken place in Los Angeles in the last 6 or 7 years. LAPD detective Brian Carr recently told an interviewer, "It's a lot different. It's got signs of a serial murder all over it, but again, they never found another murder linked to it." So I think that again boils down to link analysis, the inability to believe that due to time, space, or proximity or distance, that one might not be linked to the other. But I think that just by seeing some of these things, we can clearly see the MO that is starting to appear with this particular author. So on February 1st, 1947, we have another postcard that comes out. It's a threat to Armand Robles once again, and it's a postcard that is done in cutouts, and it says, "That young, I'll do him like I did the Black Dahlia." And he writes next over the top of his head with an arrow coming from the Black Dahlia down to Armand Robles. And it says again, "Black Dahlia Avenger" underneath it. A couple things that I like to bring out about this is that the word "next" is used in many of the communications we're going to talk about. The arrow is used in many of the communications. In fact, I found it in so many communications that it's no longer a coincidence. This is considerably something that this particular author intends to use and consistently uses throughout pretty much everything. Looks like we're going to have to pick up from here next week because we are at the end of our time at this point. Just keep in mind that we are now just going to start entering into what is referred to as the Werewolf Killer. In one breath, the suspect wants to blame Armand Robles as being the person he saw kill the Black Dahlia. Now he's saying he's actually going to kill this individual like he did the Black Dahlia. So we can kind of see the ruse and the playing of words that is occurring, which is also something that we're going to see consistently done in the Zodiac stuff. So for now, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and there's no April Fool's today for you guys. I'm a little too old for that, couldn't even come up with something good, but I hope to see you guys next week. We'll pick up from here and move on. Thank you, take care, and have a wonderful weekend. Oh,